Howdy, partners. I'm Western author Mark L. Redmond, back with the third installment in my first chapter series. I'm reading through my Western middle grade fiction series, The Adventures of Arty Anderson. We looked at Arty Goes West and Arty in the Hunt for Phantom, and today we're going to look at the third book in the series, Arty and the Texas Ranger. This one was a little different. It's a mystery, so as I wrote it, I had to do a little more planning as far as leaving clues and trying to keep my readers guessing. In this story, Arty and one of his friends discover a body in one of their favorite places to explore, and the rest of the story centers around trying to figure out who the person is and how he died. And Arty and his friend get entangled in all kinds of things. And as usual, there's some humor going on, along with the drama and the action. I hope you'll enjoy it. This is the first chapter of Arty and the Texas Ranger. Let me put my specs on here so I can read. Chapter 1, Arty and the Texas Ranger. Bill Munson, our foreman, had brought some letters with him when he returned from doing some errands in town. Half an hour later, when I walked into our parlor, Ma was sitting at her writing desk with a letter in front of her, and she was crying. Wondering who had died, I rushed across the room and knelt beside her. Putting my arms around her, I tried to ease her grief. She smiled through her tears and handed me the letter. Quickly I read, looking for bad news and checking the signature. The letter was from Grandma and Grandpa Delaney in Kentucky, telling us that they were coming to visit us. Ma had been crying because she was happy. I threw the letter into the air, jumped up and let out a whoop, and then squeezed Ma until she could hardly breathe. Then I picked up the scattered pages, and we began to calculate. The letter was 3 weeks old. Allowing for breakdowns and weather problems, Ma figured they should arrive in about 4 days. I knew I couldn't stand the wait. I looked at Ma, who was still crying, and wondered if I'd ever understand women. We hadn't seen my grandparents in over 4 years. Ma was very close to them, and I knew she was as excited as I was at the news of their coming. We had visited them in Kentucky when I was 8, and Grandpa had made that visit one I'd never forget. We had spent hours together, hunting, fishing, and watching forest creatures that almost never seemed to be afraid of us. Pa had been there with us. How I wished he could be with us again. 3 years had passed, but I still clearly remembered the fire that had destroyed our general store and killed Pa. My heart ached sometimes, especially at night when I awoke from a dream that Pa was still alive and we were together again. I didn't cry easily, but I always cried after one of those dreams. I was now 14 years old. During the 2 years Ma and I had been in Texas, I had learned to ride and track like an Indian, defend myself with my fists and feet, handle a gun or a knife as well as some men, and survive in some of the toughest parts of Texas. I was Miss Ross's best student in reading and writing, and only 1 or 2 of my friends could beat me in spelling or ciphering. Now, I know that all my talk about being able to ride and track and fight and shoot probably sounds like nothing but wind passing through leaky organ bellows, but it's the truth. I'm not bragging either. I give most of the credit to those who taught me those things and to the Lord, who let me learn them so easily. Why, even the book learning part came easy to me. Esther Travis, who was in school with me and a really good friend for a girl, said it wasn't fair for a person to pick up so much, so fast, with so little effort. It wasn't that I didn't have to try, it was just that I didn't have to try very hard at most things. Chad, our top hand, had been teaching me to shoot and fight. Although I'd grown 4 inches and gained 15 pounds while Chad was training and working with me, he could outfight, outshoot, outride, and outwork me before breakfast and not even break a sweat. When Chad had agreed, with Ma's permission, to start teaching me how to fight, I had been excited. But that excitement had left me in a hurry when I found that my training, as Chad called it, would include splitting and stacking firewood, running at a slow pace for hours. He always grinned and said he was going to make an Indian out of me. Meanwhile, Marshal Luke Bodie, who rode out to the ranch at least twice a week with some excuse, but who really came to see Ma, kept giving me pointers to help me shoot better. He had given me my first pistol, a new one that shot bullets with metal casings instead of an old Colt like the one that our cook Grubby carried. His was a cap and ball pistol that seemed as if it would be slow and awkward, but in Grubby's hands it wasn't either one. While the men were training me in what Bill always called cowboy savvy, Ma and Miss Ross, who had become best friends, were working on my book learning. In addition to the regular schoolwork that I did, I made sure I was always reading a book. Now that may sound like a complaint, but it isn't. I liked nothing better than to saddle Prince early on a summer morning and ride off with something to eat, a fishing pole, or some extra cartridges, or both, and a good book. I always let Ma know where I'd be so she wouldn't worry. About the time the sun came up, I'd be either at my favorite fishing hole or in the canyon where I practiced shooting. The first thing I always did at either place was unsaddle Prince and picket him so he wouldn't run off. It wasn't that I didn't trust him. He'd come like a puppy when I called him. I tied him because I didn't want him scared off by a cougar or some other wild critter that might wander by. When Prince was contentedly chomping grass, I'd take my cartridges or my fishing pole, depending on where I was, and my book, and make myself comfortable. When I got tired of either fishing or shooting, I'd read for a while, and then take a nap, or, as the Mexicans call it, a siesta. When I woke up, I'd eat what I'd caught, shot, or brought from home, after doing what cleaning and cooking was necessary. Then I'd read some more before heading back to the ranch to do whatever chores I had to do. Sometimes I got back to the ranch a little later than others because I'd either slept longer or had come to a place in what I was reading that was so good I couldn't stop. And let me tell you, with the books Ma and Miss Ross gave me, there were plenty of good places. I read The Last of the Mohicans, Oliver Twist, The Spy, Rob Roy, and some strange stories by a man named Edgar Allan Poe. I didn't always understand everything I read, but I got most of it, and what I got was good. The morning after we got the letter from my grandparents, I made one of my trips to my fishing hole. I had caught 3 large catfish and 2 trout that were keepers, and then the fish stopped biting. I got out my book and read a story by Poe, The Murders in the Rue Morgue. It was about a detective who solved a terrible murder mystery by finding clues that the police had missed. When I had finished the story, I laid the book aside and stretched out on the ground with my head on my saddle. I woke up an hour or so later from a nightmare about a huge monkey chasing me with a straight razor. I shuddered and called, "Prince!" When I heard his answering whinny, I felt better. "Don't come, partner," I said. "I just wanted to make sure that monkey hadn't scared you away." I was hungry, and the thought of those fish cooking in the frying pan made my mouth water. From my saddlebags, I got out the pan and the small coffee pot I always carried. Then I gathered some dry brush and built a fire. When I walked to the edge of the water and stooped to get my piece of twine that I had used for a stringer, I couldn't believe my eyes. It was gone. The stick I had shoved into the soft mud after I had tied the twine to it had been pulled up. It hadn't been dragged into the water by the fish. It had been pulled up by a human hand while I had been sleeping. I looked around to see if anything else had been taken. I saw that my book was lying on a rock 10 or 12 feet from where I had left it. Still looking around, I walked over and picked it up. A wrinkled scrap of paper was sticking out of the book, marking my place. Someone had scribbled this message in pencil. Only the book learning part of schooling is over for the summer. It's time for a lesson. I have your fish. Find me in time, and we'll eat them together. There was no signature, but I knew the handwriting. I put out my fire, collected everything, and saddled Prince. I had a trail to find. And that's the end of chapter 1. And from there, first Arty has to go find who took his breakfast, and if he finds it in time, eat with him. But then eventually he's going to get dragged into a much bigger mystery. But reading these mystery stories about Edgar Allan Poe's detective, C. Auguste Dupin, helps him develop some of the skills that he needs to try to solve his own mystery when it comes. I hope you enjoyed that. I'll be reading parts of the third, of the fourth, fifth, and sixth book in future videos. Please come back often. Hit the subscribe button at the bottom. Tell your friends. Share the books if you have them. If you don't have them, get them. I think you'll enjoy them. For now, that's it. Happy trails.